Greetings loves, it is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today I've got a very special review of the Holosun 507C X2 with the ACSS Vulcan Reticle. This is a very special pistol optic. It's pretty groundbreaking in my opinion, and there's a lot to be said about it. So without further ado, let's jump in. Now before I get into the details of the specific optic, I do want to kind of talk about my background experience with handgun optics in general. I've been running a Tacticool RMR Type 2 for about a year and a half on my CZ P10C, and it's been a huge game changer. I will never want to shoot anything without an optic at this point, including handguns. Iron sights are great. They're usually pretty reliable, and they're a good standby, but if I can have a primary optic, I'm always going to opt for that every single time. I'm not going to be shooting handguns without optics if I can help it. That being said, the Tacticool RMR is a fantastic optic. It's extremely rugged. It is a very classic design. It really set the benchmark for most handgun optics that followed afterwards. Yet, I also think it is a very overrated piece of hardware, and Holosun has really been doing some pretty amazing things. I was actually a lot more impressed than I thought I would be about its reliability in general, across the board. Sage Dynamics actually does some really good reviews of the ability for Holosun to withstand abuse, where many other, even more expensive brands just don't. So, I mean, in my opinion, Holosun is probably actually pretty close to Tacticool in terms of durability and reliability. That's not my personal experience, that's just been my cumulative understanding based on other accounts that I've seen and other people who've torture tested these things. So take that with a grain of salt, but that being said, I mean, these things are fairly affordable now and they're only getting better and better. So I strongly recommend that if you are interested in shooting handguns a lot, look into an optic, get your slide milled or get an optics ready version of some sort of whatever handgun you want, and just go to town. It's probably the #1 upgrade next to maybe a weapon light on any gun. One other point of business, I just want to talk about my relationship with Holosun. Now, I've never worked with Holosun on anything before. They simply sent me this optic to try out. They did send it to me for free. There were no other funds exchanged. You could argue that this is still payment of some sort because I'm getting free stuff. That's fine. I also have an affiliate link with them that I did get when I got this optic, but all that being said, I'm still going to give you the most unbiased and absolutely honest, brutal review I possibly can of this optic. Now, let's actually talk about the optic. This optic is based on the Holosun 507C X2. It simply has a different reticle. This reticle, however, is what really kind of makes all of this what it is. This reticle was developed by Primary Arms based on their ACSS system, and it was collaborated with Holosun to produce this optic. That is really cool to see. It's really cool to see these two companies kind of blurring the lines here and really coming together to create something really special. The reticle itself is a 10 MOA chevron that is pointed upwards. Much in the fashion of other ACSS reticles, this one also includes a few sneaky bullet drop compensation points. Now, basically, the very top tip of your chevron is going to be your 0 point. The first bullet drop compensation point is going to be the internal top tip of the chevron, and then your second BDC is going to be the very bottom of the chevron at the end of those two wings. Now, obviously, depending on your caliber and on your handgun that you're using, this is going to vary where you want to zero it so you can properly use the proportions for the BDC. Holosun includes this in their manual so that you can actually get this thing calibrated and set up properly. In my case, I'm using 9mm, so the very first 0 point there is going to be at 25 yards. The first BDC is going to be at 50 yards, and then the second is going to be at 100 yards. Now, this is kind of a problem for me because I actually zero all my 9mm handguns at 15 yards. I think that is a much superior zero for me personally for using a handgun in a defensive capacity. That being said, obviously, if you want to really use a BDC, yeah, zero it at 25. Otherwise, I would just recommend learning your holds because you should be anyway, and you should be training with those. The BDC is just a guideline, so just keep that in mind. Beyond that, there is a very large 250 MOA circle that surrounds the chevron reticle, and that can be deactivated only if you want to just have the chevron by holding the minus button down for 3 seconds. Now, with the optic up close to my eyes, I can see both the chevron and the circle no problem. However, when I go to extension, I can see the chevron and the circle. However, when I go to extension, that circle disappears and all I can see is a chevron. The reason for that being is that the surrounding circle is actually a guideline to help give you feedback if you are canted at all and get you back on target very quickly. You want to make sure that that chevron is nice and centered and that you haven't lost it, and that circle helps you retrieve it very quickly. A lot of new shooters especially struggle with this when they have inconsistent presentation, and they're oftentimes just hunting around for their dot and their optic and they just don't know where it is and it takes them forever. So this is a great way to get very quick feedback and get back on target really quickly. It's also a great training tool for that same purpose, and beyond that, if you're shooting in any atypical situations where you're not at a flat range, it's going to be pretty difficult to acquire certain handgun optics. That's just a fact of life. If you're shooting around barricades or underneath objects, this actually makes things a lot easier. And so for the most experienced shooters out there, I still strongly recommend this. Now, some critics out there might say this is a crutch that allows you to be lazy, to continue bad habits, and continue to be sloppy in your presentation. And to that I say absolute nonsense. First of all, this is only there in the event that you are actually canted and need to get back on target quickly. I'd rather have that than not, and anything that does improve my shooting, I'm going to definitely want in whatever I'm doing. Also, beyond that, nothing replaces skill. If you are actually trying to get to be a better shooter and using timed drills, the only thing that's going to shave off time here is just getting a proper presentation that's consistent and reliable in the first place. This simply helps mitigate the chances of you being off every once in a while, but you're not going to want to rely on it anyway if you're actually serious about shooting in the first place. It's simply there as a failsafe in my opinion. And to that end, I absolutely support having this on any optic. I think this is a brilliant idea. It's groundbreaking. There's nothing out there like it, and I would love to see more optics doing things like this. Now, in terms of the quality of the reticle goes, it's actually really crisp. It doesn't have nearly as much refraction as much as I've seen around other red dots and such. And in my experience, they usually do have a little bit of blooming, and this one just doesn't seem to have remotely as much. I do have astigmatism in both eyes. It is fairly minor. I can use pretty much any red dot with just a little bit of training and kind of work around it, but this one is remarkably clean in my experience. I've also seen a lot of reviews from other people who have much more serious astigmatism, and they kind of said the same thing, that this thing is much crisper than any red dot that they've seen. So kudos to that. I don't know what magic they used in it, but it's really good to know. Now, for my super nerds out there, there is another interesting phenomena under night vision. Specifically, I think it's probably because of the focal length of the lens to the optic that is closer than your actual naked eye is, thereby allowing you to see the ring around the chevron when you're aiming at full extension. That's just something to note. It looks kind of cool. It doesn't really bother me at all, but I just think that that is worth mentioning. That is just a byproduct of using night vision with this kind of optic. Now, in terms of function, there are two buttons, a plus and a minus, on the left side of the optic. Now, compared to the Tacticool RMR, which has two very large buttons on either side of the optic, these are a little bit harder to use, but they're not impossible. They are fairly tactile and easy enough to feel when I do press them down at least. The first mode is going to be your auto mode, and that's where the optic measures the ambient light that you're in and then adjusts the reticle brightness accordingly. The second mode is going to be your manual mode, where you can adjust the brightness to any one of 12 different brightness settings, 2 of which are for night vision. The third mode is going to be lockout mode, where once you set things in manual mode, you can enter lockout mode so that those buttons don't actually adjust anything. Any of these modes can be cycled through by holding the plus sign down for 3 seconds. In terms of the build, it's made out of milled 7075 aluminum. It's also got a really nice thick frame around the glass, so it should be able to withstand all sorts of abuse that you might throw at it. It's a very bomb-proof design, and if there was any doubt, there is a lifetime warranty. Beyond that, it's got a really nice matte finish. Now, the glass uses a multi-coated glass, so it should withstand dings and scratches pretty well, and it also has a very slight blue tint to it. This is not nearly as dramatic as the Tacticool RMR, so if you don't like the blue tint of the Tacticool RMR, this one might be a little bit better for you. In terms of the emitter, it is an open emitter design, meaning that there are various things that can obstruct the emitter, thereby stopping you from seeing your reticle. That is not usually a problem for most people, but you may need to make sure that you keep that area clean and clear. The good news is that there are drainage holes on either side, so if there is any sort of water pooling up, it at least has somewhere to go. In terms of power, it uses a CR1632 battery. It's accessible through this tray on the right side of the optic that you simply need to unscrew and open. It's very easy to replace your batteries. You don't have to readjust your zero or anything, unlike the Tacticool RMR, where you need to take it off the plate and replace the battery and then re-zero every single year. That drives me absolutely crazy. I don't know why Tacticool is still doing this. This is simply a better way of doing things. The battery itself should last about 50,000 hours at the middle or 6th setting. Also, it uses shake-awake technology, so normally when your gun is at rest, you're conserving battery power that way. Beyond that, you also have the solar panels on the very top, which allow you to get supplemental power depending on how much ambient light you have. The optic uses both elevation and windage adjustments. Every single click on those knobs is 1 MOA point of impact shift. Now, every time that you do make those adjustments, the clicks are very audible, and they're also very tactile, and it's very easy to tell what you're doing, as opposed to other optics that I've used, which are pretty mushy when you adjust them. They also include a nice adjustment tool just to make the job even easier. One really important specification is water resistance. You don't want your optic just shorting out in the rain. That would be really crappy. This one is rated at IPX7, so no worries there. Another thing to note, if you are trying to mount this optic to anything like a PCC or rifle using Picatinny rail, they do include the Picatinny adapter, which is great. One really important consideration is going to be price, of course. This one currently retails for $309.99. Compare that to the Tacticool RMR Type 2, which currently retails for $439.99, and you have a fairly significant price difference. Especially considering the fact that I actually prefer this optic over the RMR now. I'm going to be using it on my carry gun moving forward until I have a reason not to. There's nothing wrong with the RMR. It's a very robust, battle-proven, and solid optic that I absolutely would trust my life with. But that being said, the glass quality, the optic itself, the reticle is just kind of underwhelming compared to this. This thing is just so much more innovative, so much smarter, so much more efficient, and it's kind of a huge landmark in terms of handgun optics. I think as we start to see more handgun optics become more common, we're going to see even more interesting innovations on the market, and this certainly is going to be a very big milestone for that. I'd love to see more of this happen, and I'm very hopeful. I think this is a great optic. I would definitely recommend it to everybody out there if you are looking for a handgun optic. This is going to be at the top of my list, honestly. Well, I really hope this review was useful to folks looking into handgun optics. If you're just looking to get your first one or upgrade, this one is strongly recommended. And if you end up trying to buy one, please try to follow the affiliate link in the description below. Also, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. I also want to give a huge shout out, as always, to everybody on Patreon who has been supporting this channel. You make this possible. I don't run ads on this channel. I don't monetize it in any other way. Everything that you see here is brought to you by viewers like you. So if you want to help out, you can go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. You can see the end of the video for the names of my biggest contributors. And that's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there. And as always, please take care. Bye!